Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to tackle something that, let's be honest, can feel like a total chore, academic referencing. But what if I told you it's actually a super simple logical system? Stick with me, and by the end of this, you'll have it down pat.
All right, first things first. Let's clear up a super common point of confusion: bibliography versus reference list. You've probably heard both, right? Well, they're not the same thing, and knowing the difference is pretty much step one.
So think of a bibliography as your research diary. It's a list of everything you looked at, every book you opened, every article you skimmed, whether you ended up using it or not. A reference list, though, that's way more precise. It only includes the sources you actually cited in your work. And for most of the stuff you'll be writing, the reference list is the one that matters.
Okay, so why bother with all this? Why is it such a big deal? The best way to think about it, honestly, is like you're leaving an academic breadcrumb trail. You're giving your reader a clear path so they can follow right in your footsteps and see how you got to your conclusions.
And this trail? It does two really important jobs. First, it lets anyone reading your work find your exact sources. Maybe they want to check your facts or just dig deeper themselves. And second, it's proof. It shows the depth of your research and proves that you've built your arguments on a solid, credible foundation.
Now, here's the cool part. Even though referencing can seem crazy complicated with all its rules, it really just boils down to a simple system with two parts. That's it, just two. If you get how these two parts connect, you've pretty much cracked the whole code. All right, so part one is what we call in-text citations. Think of these as little signposts you drop right inside your paragraphs whenever you use info from a source. And part two, that's the reference list at the very end of your paper. That's the destination, the detailed map that tells you exactly what each of those little signposts means.
Okay, let's get into the nitty-gritty of part one, actually placing those signposts. There are a few different ways to do this, and believe it or not, each one can subtly change the emphasis of your sentence.
So the most common way is what's called information prominent. This is where the fact itself is the star of the show. You make your point, and then you just pop the author and the year in parentheses at the end. See? Super clean, super direct.
But you can also switch it up and make it author prominent. Here, you actually weave the author's names right into your sentence, making them part of the story. Notice how the year still goes in parentheses right after their names? This is perfect for when you want to highlight who made the claim.
And there's even a third way. You can lead with the year. This is really useful when the timeline is important, like if you're tracing how an idea has changed over time, or you just want to show off how up-to-date your sources are.
Okay, you've got the basic signposts down, but what about those trickier situations? Like when you're quoting someone word for word, or you're talking about a source that you haven't actually read yourself.
When you use a direct quote, the rule is simple and it is absolute. You have to copy it exactly as it appears in the original. I mean, word for word, comma for comma, even if there's a typo. And, this is the crucial part, you must always include the page number where you found it. Here's a perfect example of what that looks like. Notice at the end, it's not just the authors and the year. You've got that specific page number, P14. For a direct quote, this is totally non-negotiable. And here's how you do it when the authors are actually part of your sentence. You see? The names are there, the year is right after in parentheses, but that all-important page number still comes at the very end of the quote.
Okay, but what happens when you're reading a book by, say, Pollitt and Beck, and they start talking about this amazing study by someone called Fawcett? You haven't actually read Fawcett's original work, just the summary of it in this other book. What do? Well, that's where something called a secondary source citation comes in. It's actually pretty simple. You use this little phrase, as cited in. This is you telling your reader, hey, just so you know, I learned about Fawcett's ideas by reading Pollitt and Beck. It's all about being transparent. And then, in your reference list at the end, you only list the source you actually held in your hands. In this case, the book by Pollitt and Beck.
So we've got the two pieces, right? The little signposts in your text and the big map at the end. But for this whole system to work, there has to be a totally unbreakable link between them. And that link is governed by one simple golden rule.
Yeah, people often call this the golden rule of referencing. It's not rocket science, but getting this right every single time is what really separates the good referencing from the great referencing.
And the rule is this. Your in-text citations and your reference list have to be a perfect match, a mirror image of each other.
Every single source you mention in your text must be in the reference list. And, just as important, every single source in your reference list must be cited somewhere in your text. No extras, nothing missing. It has to be a perfect one-to-one match.
And here you can see that perfect match in action. That short little signpost in the text, Whitney and Rolfe's 2011, it points directly to one and only one full entry in the reference list. They are always, always connected. So before you hand in your next assignment, just ask yourself this one simple question. Think of it as your final check. Are my citations and my reference list a perfect match? If the answer is yes, then congratulations. You've just laid down a perfect academic breadcrumb trail.